I'm Hugh Adams, and I began my passion for photography over 40 years ago. Early on, I was drawn to black and white and loved the darkroom process. I was fortunate enough to attend an Ansel Adams workshop in Yosemite and meet many of Ansel's disciples and his teaching assistants in the 1980s. My photography took a hiatus due to work and family for many years, and upon returning several years ago, I embraced the digital world of sensors, Photoshop, and Lightroom. To get up to speed, I went to college to take various photography classes and have attended many workshops on photography, Lightroom, and Photoshop. I've had a solo exhibition of 35 photographs at the Irving Arts Center and have had photographs entered into the New Texas Talent Exhibition at Craighead Green twice, and an award winner in the Dallas Morning News Amateur Photographer of the Year contest, and have 2 photographs accepted in the Texas Society's International Competition and Member Show. My website is hughadams.net. I approach judging images based on their impact, originality, if they've used a different perspective or a new approach, or maybe it's the same shot that we've seen many times, but is technically done in an outstanding manner. Also, subject matter: does the photograph tell a story? And particularly in black and white, the contrast between the light and dark tones. The composition of a photograph is also extremely important, as well as its technical quality. The first photograph in the beginner category is Forgotten Piece of the City with a score of 6. Suggestion I'd have for this photograph is to shoot at a different time of day to reduce the harsh highlights and maybe to focus in a little more on a specific subject. Next photograph is Children Irish Dancing with a score of 6. My suggestion would be to include more of the girl in the lower right, maybe recompose to get rid of the distracting light and equipment on the right side of the photograph, and burn in the white wall on the left side of the photograph. Next is This One's for You, Ma, with a score of 8 and a place of 3 by Jeannie Shelton. This is a very nice portrait. I would suggest blurring the background and reducing the prominence of the boy's hand in front by either recomposing or having him make a fist to de-emphasize the hand. Next photograph is Leopard in the Veil with a score of 11 and a place of 2 by Jeffrey Schambach. This photograph is perfectly composed with a great expression on the leopard's face. My only suggestion would be to maybe increase the contrast slightly and maybe a little vignetting. Last photograph in this category is Silver Lily with a score of 14 and a place of 1 by Nancy Mack. This is an excellent photograph. Composition and contrast create impact. Wonderful example of leading lines. I would love to see this photograph done in black and white. First image in the intermediate category is Abstract with a score of 6. I would suggest removing the color cast in this image and reducing the highlights on the right side of the photograph. Next is Stairway to Heaven with a score of 7. I might consider reducing the pink color cast, increasing the sharpness, maybe cropping this photograph in a little from the left side. Next photograph is Dry Riverbed with a score of 8. Good use of leading lines. I might suggest increasing the impact by creating more highlights in the riverbed by painting with light. Next photograph is Steps with a score of 8. Nice composition in this photograph. I might consider using a slow shutter speed to make the water more flowing and reduce the white spot in the middle of the photograph at the bottom. Next photograph is Waiting to be Restored with a score of 9. I might suggest cropping the image down to the window in the middle of the photograph, bringing in the right side slightly, and I would print this on different paper than metallic. Next photograph is Rebecca with a score of 9. It's a nice portrait. I might suggest consider using the rule of thirds for composition for this portrait. I would tone down her right earring and the left shoulder, which is brighter than the subject's face. Next is Joyce Magnum's photograph, A Picture for Mommy, with a score of 11 and a place of honorable mention. Great composition with impact in this photograph. I might suggest slightly more contrast and sharpness and consider vignetting the image slightly. Next is Thoughtful with a score of 10 and a place of 3 by Mary Jean Blevins. This is a beautiful portrait, great lighting, composition, and technically excellent. Next is 51 Chevy with a score of 11 and a place of 2 by Walter Brock. This photograph is well composed, very sharp. I might suggest removing the white object in the left background and slightly reducing the orange color cast. Last photograph in this group is Quote the Raven with a score of 13 and a place of 1 by Lulu Warren. This is a very mysterious and foreboding image that's technically well done. Only suggestion I have again is maybe some slight vignetting on the corners to bring the focus more on to the bird. Advanced category is next. Photograph looking back with a score of 6. I might suggest lightening the model's face and recomposing to reduce the prominence of the right arm. Next is the brand new one with a score of 8. If I were doing this, I would darken the father down to put more focus on the infant. Next photograph is Tenerio Rainforest with a score of 10. Nicely composed. I might suggest using a graduated filter to lighten up the bottom portion of the photograph. Next is Forbidden Love with a score of 12 and an honorable mention by James Edward. This is a very nicely done and impactful photograph. I might suggest a different cropping so that more front of the horse shows at least an equal distance to the back of the horse, and maybe more of her foot and possibly his boot. Next is The Canyon in Partial Shadow by Jim Walsh with a score of 12 and a place of 3. This image is nicely composed and beautifully printed. I would suggest maybe a slight more contrast. Next is Big Sky in New Mexico with a score of 13 and a place of 2 by Jim Spencer. This is a beautiful photograph, good use of leading lines with the fence. Composition is very good. The image could be sharper. I would darken the lower right side of the print and maybe brush in a little clarity at the bottom of the image. Next is Knowing Look with a score of 15 and a place of 1 by Bert Barlow. This is an impactful photo, nicely composed, and technically outstanding. First image in the master category is Quandary, Left or Right, with a score of 6. I might suggest cropping this photograph down from the top and maybe from the right-hand side as well to focus more on the subject. Next photograph is Bridge Over Flooded Water with a score of 6. This photograph is nicely composed. I would suggest that it be reprinted with more contrast where there is a white point and black point in the photograph so that it would not be an overall gray tone. Next photograph is Become the Swamp with a score of 6. I might suggest adding some more contrast and maybe a vignette. This photograph is nicely composed. I would suggest maybe shooting it at a different time of day to get more contrast and to open up the darkness of the statues and toning down the skyline in the background. Next photograph is Yosemite with a score of 7. This image is nicely composed. I might suggest expanding the tonal range of the photograph, using a little more contrast and maybe the clarity slider in Lightroom. Next photograph is New York City skyline with a score of 9. I might suggest increasing the tonal range of this photograph, maybe even eliminating some of the birds and reducing the cloud in the upper left-hand corner of the photograph. Next photograph is the Majestic with a score of 10. This photograph is reminiscent of ones taken back in the 40s and 50s, nicely composed. I like the woman walking on the street. Very nice photograph. Next photograph is Rural Iceland Church with a score of 12. This is a very nicely composed photograph with a great tonal range. Next photograph is behind Sjál Landfoss in Iceland. Not sure I got that name right. With a score of 12. This photograph has a beautiful tonal range and very nicely composed and very nicely printed. Next photograph is the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. This is a beautifully composed and printed image with great tones. The only suggestion I would have is to try to reduce the flaring on the bridge pole and on the flagpole. Next photograph is Dallas After the Rains with a score of 13. This is a beautifully composed and printed image that works well on what I believe looks like metallic paper. Next photograph is Grand Canyon 2015 with a score of 13. This is a beautifully composed photograph with a lot of wonderful tones in the image. I suggest lightening the clouds in the upper left part of the photograph and consider eliminating the white cloud on the upper right corner. Just a very nice photograph. Next photograph is Father Robert with a score of 13 and a place of honorable mention. Photograph by Don Chaplin. This is a beautiful photograph, nicely composed, very well lit, and very nicely printed. Next photograph is Harmonica Man with a score of 13 and a place of 3 by John Lehman. The subject matter of this photo is great. The composition is excellent. I might suggest printing it on something other than what appears to be metallic paper. Maybe taking the tone down slightly. I'd like to see it a little bit more in black and white, but a very nice photograph. Next photograph is Geothermal Plant in Iceland by Maria Downey with a score of 14 and a place of 2. This photograph has extremely high impact. It's technically very well done, composed very well. Excellent use of leading lines and wide angle lens. Just a very, very nice photograph. Next photograph is Hello Soldier with a score of 14 and a place of 1 by Peter Stackson. This is a photograph that's been taken many times back in the War II time, I guess. But it's beautifully composed, technically excellent, printed very nicely, and just very well done photograph. The best of show is Hello Soldier by Peter Stackson. In summary, I thought all of the photographs were very nicely done, very impressive group of photographs. I would have the following suggestions for you to consider. I thought several of the images were overtoned, particularly sepia toned. I would suggest considering split toning rather than sepia. Most museum or gallery photographs are matted in white, not black, so I would consider matting the particularly black and white photographs with white mats. I'd be careful using metallic paper, which can cause an image to have an overall gray cast, losing a lot of its tonal range. I would also suggest vignetting to draw the viewer to the subject more, and generally avoid white on edges because it's usually very distracting. Expanding the tonal range of the image, making sure that you have probably a zone range of at least 3 to 7 or 8. And of course, contrast is usually always good for a photograph. I would also suggest that members of your club, if they haven't gone to the photo galleries in Dallas, is to go to Photographs Do Not Bend, Sun to Moon Gallery, and the After Image, which is in the Quadrangle and is one of the oldest photography galleries in the country. I think you'll get some ideas about paper to print on, framing, matting, that would overall improve the quality of your images. Thank you very much for this opportunity.